In Stalin's Kremlin, no one was more feared than the man trusted to run the secret police, Lavrentiy Beria. He commanded gulags holding millions, kept a list of 44,000 enemies marked for death, and supervised the Soviet push for the atomic bomb, all while his own colleagues slept with cyanide capsules out of terror. But how did a single enforcer terrify the world's most brutal regime, and what was the fatal mistake that turned that terror back on him? Lavrentiy Beria's power rested not just on his proximity to Stalin, but on the vast machinery he controlled. As head of the NKVD from 1938 to 1953, Beria commanded a network that reached into every corner of Soviet life. His authority extended over the secret police, internal security, and the sprawling gulag system. By the early 1950s, the gulags held more than 2.5 million prisoners, political enemies, suspected spies, and ordinary citizens swept up in quotas. Forced labor camps provided the backbone for industrial projects, mines, and even the construction of entire cities. Beria's signature appeared on execution lists containing over 44,000 names. Each decision, reduced to a mark on paper, meant life or death for thousands. Within the walls of the Lubyanka, the NKVD headquarters, Beria oversaw interrogations and torture. Department heads reported directly to him, bypassing normal bureaucratic channels. He was known to personally review files, make notes in the margins, and demand results. He built a culture of terror within the security services. The reach of his authority meant that no one, whether a factory worker or a senior party official, was beyond his surveillance. Orders from his office could erase a name, a family, or a village overnight. Beria's influence stretched further when Stalin appointed him to oversee the Soviet nuclear project, the atomic bomb effort, in August 1945. As chair of the Special Committee on Atomic Energy, he unified scientists, engineers, and security forces under one command. Department S, a secret division within the NKVD, handled every detail, including research, espionage, and the movement of uranium mined by Gulag prisoners. Beria secured blueprints from Western sources through spies like Klaus Fuchs, accelerating the project's timeline. The first Soviet atomic test, RDS-1, detonated in 1949, years ahead of Western predictions. Beria's management style combined terror with efficiency. Scientists worked under constant threat, knowing a single misstep could mean arrest or worse. Inside the Kremlin, Beria was the only Politburo member permitted to keep armed guards. Western intelligence officers called him our Himmler, recognizing the unique blend of administrative skill and cruelty he brought to the Soviet state. His power was absolute, his resources unmatched. The apparatus he built would shape the fate of millions, and his control over it made him untouchable for a time. Inside Stalin's inner circle, fear was a constant companion. Lavrentiy Beria's colleagues learned quickly that proximity to power offered no protection from his reach. Nikita Khrushchev, in his private diaries, called Beria a vicious animal, not out of spite but out of lived experience. Vyacheslav Molotov watched as his own wife Polina was arrested on Beria's orders in 1949. Molotov said nothing. He knew that protest could mean joining her in a cell, or worse. Rumors spread among the elite like wildfire. Georgy Malenkov was said to keep a cyanide capsule hidden on his person, a desperate insurance in case Beria turned on him. The walls themselves were suspect. Beria ordered listening devices installed in Stalin's dacha, and even the dictator himself tolerated the surveillance. No conversation, no whisper, stayed private for long. The message was clear: trust no one, not even the shadows. NKVD officers understood the rules better than anyone. A saying passed quietly among them said that when you are summoned to Beria, you kiss your family goodbye. The threat was not idle. Promotion or punishment could turn on a single missed report, a poorly chosen word, or the whim of a man who demanded absolute loyalty. Agents who failed, sometimes for nothing more than a late file, were shot without warning. Their families vanished from Moscow's records soon after. For those who lived near Beria's Moscow mansion, the terror had a different face. He maintained a private prison in his own basement, a place where screams were muffled by thick walls. The city's women learned to fear the sight of a black NKVD car. At least, 39 victims of abduction and rape were later documented, some named in trial records, others lost to silence. Doctors who treated the injuries were threatened into secrecy. Official cover-ups erased evidence, but horror lingered in memory. Even Stalin's lieutenants, men who wielded power over millions, watched their backs. Diaries from the era describe Beria in bitter tones. One entry simply calls him the Spider. The atmosphere was thick with suspicion. Every meeting, every dinner could be a trap. This was not just a regime of terror for the masses. It was a world where the powerful lived in dread of the man standing next to them. On the evening of March 1st, 1953, Stalin collapsed in his private dacha, paralyzed and unable to speak. The guards hesitated, unsure whether to call for help. Hours passed before Lavrentiy Beria arrived, stepping into the shadowed hallway with his usual confidence. He ordered the guards to stand aside and denied the doctor's entry, leaving Stalin unattended through the night. Only after midnight did medical staff finally reach the dictator, but by then little could be done. Rumors swirled among the inner circle. Some whispered about poison, others pointed to Beria's deliberate delay. The official autopsy listed a massive cerebral hemorrhage, aggravated by years of hypertension. No evidence of toxins was found, but the suspicion lingered. On March 5, 1953, at 9:50 in the evening, Stalin died as Beria stood at his bedside. Witnesses later recalled Beria's words, cold and unmistakable, that "bastard is finally dead." In the hours that followed, Beria moved swiftly, signaling the start of a new order before Stalin's body had even cooled. Within days of Stalin's death, Beria moved at a pace that stunned even his closest rivals. He ordered the merger of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of State Security, placing every police officer and intelligence agent in the country under his personal command. No one else in the Soviet leadership had ever wielded such control over the machinery of repression. Then came the decree that released nearly 1 million prisoners from the gulags. Families who had given up hope saw their loved ones return, but inside the Kremlin, Beria's motives drew suspicion. Was this mercy or a calculated move to build a base of support beyond the party elite? He pushed for sweeping changes in the Soviet republics, proposing greater autonomy for Ukraine and the Baltic states. Hardliners saw betrayal in these plans, fearing the unraveling of Moscow's grip. Abroad, Beria floated the idea of German reunification and hinted at abandoning East Germany entirely, alarming his colleagues who saw this as a threat to Soviet power in Europe. Secret police files from the period include a memo, handwritten and unsigned, outlining a plan to eliminate key rivals within months. The leadership trio of Khrushchev, Malenkov, and Molotov began to see not just a rival, but a threat that had to be stopped. At precisely 3 p.m. on June 26, 1953, the doors to the Kremlin's Presidium chamber closed on a meeting that would decide the fate of Lavrentiy Beria. The air was thick with anticipation as Beria took his seat, unaware that armed officers led by Marshal Zhukov waited in a side room, hidden from view. Malenkov, steady but pale, spoke first, accusing Beria of treason. For a moment, Beria froze. Then his hand moved toward his briefcase, a gesture that sent a jolt through the room. Zhukov then burst into the chamber, flanked by uniformed men. "Hands up! You are under arrest!" The command echoed off marble walls. Beria protested, but Zhukov pinned his arms before he could reach the case. Within seconds, the most feared man in the Soviet Union was in handcuffs. He was hustled out of the Kremlin and driven not to Lubyanka, but to a fortified military bunker. Across Moscow, NKVD generals loyal to Beria were seized in coordinated raids. The city outside remained silent, unaware that a regime had just been overturned in a single afternoon. Today, Beria's name still silences conversations in Moscow, a reminder that unchecked power can outlive even its most ruthless architect. As new regimes rewrite old histories, the evidence in sealed archives warns, monsters are made possible when fear outweighs accountability. Some legacies are buried but never forgotten.